Disclaimer: Hindustani has two registers, Urdu, written in Nastaliq, and Hindi, written in Devanagari. As explained by the Oxford English Dictionary, Urdu is the language of the Muslim conquerors of Hindustan, being a form of Hindi with a large admixture of Arabic, Persian, and other foreign elements. While Hindustani can be written in Devanagari, as you see in the Om symbol, it can also be written in Nastaliq, like so. This video covers vocabulary transmitted over 3.5 centuries between Mughal-controlled Hindustan and the British Empire via the East India Company. For this reason, when examining Hindustani words, I will use Urdu in the Nastaliq script instead of Hindi in the Devanagari. When Sir Thomas Smythe founded the East India Company in 1599 in hopes of replicating the riches the Dutch, French, Portuguese, and Spanish were bringing back to Europe by the literal boatload, he couldn't have possibly imagined the power his newly chartered company would wield in the upcoming centuries. He definitely could not have fathomed the changes that long-term exposure to India would wrought in the English languages. There are many languages spoken in the Indian subcontinent, and they fall into two families, Indo-European and Dravidian. As Lajpat Rai wrote in The Nation in 1918, the Hindustani language has a great many Arabic words in it due to Mohammedan influences. So in the matter of languages as well as race, India is the connecting link between Europe and Asia. It is at this crossroads of civilization that the English aim to make their presence felt. Prior to the East India Company's exploits in the Indian subcontinent, English had already been indirectly affected by Sanskrit. As Elvira Perez Iglesias points out in Revista de Lenguas para Fines Específicos, words like candy, sugar, ginger, musk, pepper, opal, rice, sandal, and taffeta entered English centuries before the EIC was conceived, brought from the Indian subcontinent along the Silk Road, transforming through other languages en route. Take sugar, for example. The processed form of sugarcane, a plant native to India, was called shakara in Sanskrit. Shakara became the Persian shakar, which became the Arabic al-sukar, which in turn became the Latin sakarum. From sakarum came the Old French sukar, and finally we have sugar. Across Eurasia, the Sanskrit roots are apparent, as in the Spanish azúcar and Russian sakar, for example. But the EIC changed to the nature of transmission and the character of the vocabulary being transmitted from Hindustan to England. The new vocabulary continued to contain words related to trade, but importantly there was an influx of military slang and words that denoted a new world order in that hemisphere. This is reflected in British literature and by authors such as Rudyard Kipling. The bulk of these words were transmitted from Hindustani. But what is Hindustani? According to the Salem Press Encyclopedia, Hindustani is the lingua franca of Pakistan and northern India. As we learned in Ba and Cable, ancient Sanskrit is believed to be the mother tongue of all Indo-European languages. With the establishment of the Muslim-ruled Mughal Empire came Hindustani, a language derivative of Sanskrit written in both Nastaliq and Devanagari. Urdu, the Persianized register of Hindustani, became the favored language of the Mughal court of time because it retained the beauty of Farsi, the language of the arts, and shared the script and alphabet of Arabic, the language of religion, math, and the sciences, but was also 75% mutually intelligible to Hindi speakers. While the Portuguese set up trading posts in Goa in the south of the Indian subcontinent, far from the reach of the Mughal emperor and where Dravidian languages reigned supreme, the English attempted a different route. A royal charter to sail to India was first granted to the East India Company in 1600 by Queen Elizabeth I, at which point words like chintz, calico, and gingham entered the English language. But it wouldn't be until 1612 that English gained a foothold on the mainland. King James I instructed Sir Thomas Roe of the East India Company to appeal directly to the Mughal emperor and petition for trading rights. The Emperor Jahangir, famous in the West as the builder of the Taj Mahal, granted these trading rights. At this point in history, Britain was in no condition to overtake the fabulously wealthy Mughal Empire. In fact, the word Mughal is the origin of the word mogul, as in, before entering politics, Donald Trump was a business mogul. However, over the following 250 years, the Mughal Empire declined to the point the emperor was a mere puppet of the EIC. The empire became decentralized, and true power transferred from the emperor to the nawabs, or governors, of the feudalistic provinces. Meanwhile, the East India Company slowly bloodletted the subcontinent. Money flowed freely into the coffers of Britain and the company men, many of whom used their newfound wealth to buy elections back home. Here we come to a new word in the English language, nawab, which the 21st century Urdu to English dictionary defines as lord or governor. English mispronunciation of nawab as nabab became a term used to describe men who spent a few years in Hindustan and returned with exorbitant riches from their exploits. Centuries later, when California Hill, a neighborhood in San Francisco, was populated by the mansions of railroad tycoons, it was dubbed Nabob Hill, which was shortened to the now famous Nob Hill. By the late 18th century, all of Bengal was under EIC control. As the historian William Dalrymple states, we still talk about the British conquering India, but that phrase disguises a more sinister reality. It was not the British government that seized India at the end of the 18th century, but a dangerously unregulated private company headquartered in one small office, 5 windows wide, in London. This dangerously unregulated private company had its own army, which at its height in 1803 numbered 260,000 men, twice as large as the British army. Not only did the EIC wield this massive force themselves, but sold their mercenary services to the many warring factions within Hindustan, destabilizing it further. Their army was primarily composed of natives called sepoys by the English. According to Hobson Jobson, a glossary of Anglo-Indian words, sepoy comes from the Portuguese corruption of sipahi, a word that originally meant a soldier on horseback in Urdu. But because of its usage by the EIC, sepoy grew to mean any native in the employ of the British as a soldier, rather than just simply a horseman. Other words of note that entered military jargon due to the anarchic militancy that characterized the rise of the EIC include cot, gunny sack, chit, compound, and notably khaki. According to Catherine Moriarty in her scholarly journal Dust to Dust, A Particular History of Khaki is an Urdu adjective meaning dusty or dust-colored, which comes from the Persian khak, meaning dust. In their Middle Eastern and African campaigns in dry, arid landscapes, it became painfully obvious to the British that their scarlet-red uniforms made them easy targets for enemy sharpshooters. The British Army began dyeing their wool uniforms khaki, and the shade is now synonymous with military action. From khaki come such Britishisms as khakism, meaning extreme nationalism, and the phrase in khaki, which means to be enlisted personnel. The Indian subcontinent gave a great many words to the English language, but of these, how many have endured in the decade since the end of the British Raj in 1947? As G. Subbarao memorializes in his compendium, Indian Words in English, in common usage here a chit serves for our business or our wit. Bankshaw's a place to lodge our ropes, and mango orchards all our topes. Go down usurps the warehouse place, compound denotes each walled space. To daftar khana utter thanks, the English language owes no thanks. Since office, essence, fish pond, shoe, we need not words so harsh and new. Much more I could such words expose, but gots and docks the list shall close, which in plain English is no more than wharf and post expressed before. It is interesting to note that of the 5 Indian words the poet deems necessary to the English language, only 2 are currently used in American English, chit and compound. Of the 5 he declares redundant and unnecessary to the English language, 2 have a solid position in American English. Docks and wharf are used interchangeably, while fish tank has completely replaced fish pond shoe. Of course, there are considerably more Anglo-Indian words remaining in British English than in American English, reinforced by the large number of South Asian immigrants in the British Isles. Slang such as deco for look is commonly heard on the streets of London. While the word chowkidar for guard is not in common usage, the derivative slang word chowki for prison is, perhaps most famously used in Roald Dahl's 1988 novel Matilda. The sadistic Miss Trunchbull's horrible Iron Maiden-esque broom closet that she imprisons children in is known as the chowki. Ultimately, many of the words in modern military usage from Hindustani in American and British English denote a cruel history of colonialism, exploitation, and militancy. As William Dalrymple writes in the opening pages of his book, The Anarchy, one of the very first Indian words to enter the English language was the Hindustani slang for plunder, loot. The EIC's presence in Hindustan plunged the region into enduring chaos. What does the English language have to show for it? Goods and foodstuffs and the words to describe them, such as cashmere, chintz, calico, pashmina, shawl, pajamas, cummerbund, curry, kebabs, and chutney. The EIC, a private company, changed the fate of nations in the English language forevermore. Sadly, it was at the expense of millions of lives.